Well, hello. Thanks for watching this video. This video is recording. I am with Chandra Kilgore, who is currently working in a data field. She is currently in this term when this recording is happening, a DTSC 690 student. She mentioned in the discussion boards when she was introducing herself that she works in a data field. So I wanted to ask her a couple questions about what that looks like, how she got the job, what the job looks like day to day. Pros and cons about the job would be interesting too. So without further ado, so hello, Chandra. Nice to meet you.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
So can you, without mentioning data at all or Eastern, can you tell us about yourself?
Yes, so my name's Chandra Kilgore, live in Salem, Oregon. I'm originally from Kansas.
Hmm.
Fun fact, decided I was going to be a marine biologist at a young age
Oh,
without ever seeing the ocean. Um, I did go to school and get two bachelor's degrees, one in animal science and then one in fish and wildlife, and did work as a fisheries observer on the ocean for several years. It was kind of a funny little family story now because a lot of the older people in my family remember me saying I was going to work on the ocean and thought that I was crazy. And then I did it.
fine.
From there, I moved on to Wells Fargo and did customer data management.
Hmm.
And now I work for the state of Oregon in the Oregon Judicial Department as an analyst for court data.
Oh, nice. So since you mentioned the ocean and fish, your 690 presentation is related to that in some way?
Yes, I'm doing the ethical issues around using AI for fisheries management of commercial fisheries. So when I worked as a fisheries observer, I was one part of that fisheries management. So looking at bycatch and species interaction and what they're actually catching, how they're fishing, how long they're fishing, where they're fishing. So I collected all of the raw data for fisheries management.
Oh, wow.
And then my project's going to be working on using electronic monitored boats, which are observers look over the video, which is what one of my friends does now. And then that's how they monitor those boats, but using AI to use instead of a person to
Hmm.
identify fish is kind of being tested right now. There's a couple boats on our coast that have them, but not a whole lot.
Yeah, yeah, very cool. Um, and then you have kids, from what I understand. Can you talk a
Yes.
little bit about how because this is the last class in the program, how you've juggled that, or any tips about juggling having kids and doing a master's degree and working full time?
It's busy. I have a schedule. That is how it goes. I have dedicated time every day that I sit down and we'll work on something school related. It's kind of become fewer days recently because my son is in some after school programs, so that takes up time. But my kids are 7 and 4, so they are busy and around the house. I actually involve my son in some of the programming stuff. We have a book on making computer games with Python,
Oh,
so helps my skills, but also we put his spelling words into a hangman game
hmm,
and he plays those, but he also gets to like help me program it. So he's learning, I'm learning. It's just fun.
yeah.
Um, I involve them. I don't shy away from what I'm doing. So if they ask, I'll explain. They don't really understand because they're too young, but they do pick up on it
Hmm.
and will share with their teachers what's going on at home.
Oh,
And
nice.
so that's been fun. His teacher is now getting a hangman game for their spelling words because he shared and she thought it was cool.
Oh,
And
nice.
she doesn't know. But it's kind of about balance and making sure you have dedicated time. Like I have dedicated work hours, I have dedicated school hours. And even if I'm doing school or work, my kids interrupt all the time.
Yeah,
Just par for the course working from home.
yeah. Did you do one or two courses throughout the program each term?
Up until I started working full time, I was doing two, which was significantly easier than working a full time job and doing one at a time.
Hmm, yeah,
So we'll
nice.
see.
And then, so was there kind of like, what was your story with starting a master's program? Were there a lot of colleges? Was it a long time in the making, or how did you come across Eastern and decide on that and go forward?
So when I was looking, I got both of my bachelor's degrees at Oregon State, and they have a computer science master's degree, but it's 2 years only on campus. At the time, I wasn't working because our daycare had closed, and my youngest was 1, and there was no infant care anywhere around. Like I'd have to drive 2 hours to get to the nearest place that was accepting infants, which wasn't
Wow.
convenient.
Yeah.
And so I started looking up for something that was available online. But I do better if I have due dates. So doing something self-paced, but still have due dates involved with that is helps me learn, keeps me on track. And so Eastern met both of those. And then I actually went on Reddit and read reviews on people
Hmm.
because I find that you get some pretty honest ones. I mean, you take them with a grain of salt and you can see what people genuinely complain about. And if it's something that seems silly, like they didn't like that there were due dates but not due dates,
Hmm.
obviously, if that's something I can work with, it's fine. And
Hmm.
that's how I decided on Eastern is looked at all of it, decided I wanted a master's, and then went from there.
Nice. And then, so what was your background in programming stats before coming into Eastern?
So stats, I had a whole lot of background because I did population dynamics and carrying capacity models in Excel
Hmm.
for school. That's where my fish and wildlife focus was. And so I would build whole models on how to calculate carrying capacity with different environmental factors.
Hmm.
Would have been easier in Python
Hmm.
than Excel, but at the time that's what we used because that was mid 2000s.
Hmm.
Um, And so I took a lot of stats and applied stats. And programming, I actually kind of fell into it at Wells Fargo. I ended up becoming their data person on the data management team because I could use Excel. And by use Excel, I mean I could do pivot tables and VLOOKUP, which I was the only one on a team of like 40 people that could.
Wow. Wow.
Even over my managers, when I did some nested if then statements that looked complicated,
Uh-huh.
blew their mind. They're like, oh, you can do these things. And so from there, I started doing the team's production data and keeping track of that monthly. But then they wanted to rationalize all of our reports. And so I had to look into why are certain customers popping up on these duplicate reports? And what's the business impact? Should we keep doing them? Is it important? And it was a lot of exploratory analysis. Like I found a fraud ring. I found the computer making errors. Like just, they're like, here's a bunch of data. Do what you will with it.
Wow.
So de facto just got put into a position where I was working with data. And it was great. I loved it.
Huh.
Started learning SQL there, and then had to quit and decided I wanted to spend the time with my kids, but also expand my skills. So took the Google Data Analytics course, got introduced to R, decided I really liked R, and then master's degree went from there.
Nice. So I want to ask about your current role, but maybe it makes more sense to kind of the lead up to that. So I wanted to talk about like resume, interview, things that are like 690 students who are about to graduate, things that might be helpful for them. So tell us a little bit about like where you work now, and then if you could tell us about like how you like your resume, and then how'd you get an interview? How'd you get a foot in the door? And then what did that process look like? There's a lot of questions there.
Yeah, I'll start with my current role. So I work as a data analyst 3 or an analyst 3 for the Oregon Judiciary Department. And I'm lumped in with business and fiscal services. Our whole team is, and there's like 6 of us that do data. And so we manage the data warehouse. And the way it works is the courts will put information into their program called Odyssey, and then it will get loaded into Microsoft SQL Server for us into different tables. And my job is a variety of things. So we do all of the public requests that come in. So if anyone from newspapers, I get a lot of random people, everything from research to, I think we had someone who was a realtor wanted to look at like divorce cases that had houses that were going to get sold, so he could essentially reach out to them. But any court data is public data unless it's hidden under, because of juvenile, or it's something's going to be super popular, so they've hidden the indictment first. Like all of that we can't give out, but for the most part, if it's filed in a court, it's public information. They just put a public information request in. They pay for us for our time to get the data. But we also get legislators coming through with data requests, and judges have their own projects for their own courts they want data on. And so all of those come in randomly, do those. I also build and manage several dashboards for the state. My biggest one is probation dashboard. So any binge probation, I help track all of that. And then my current one is mapping our offense codes to the FBI's criminal offense codes and their categories, because they're not the same. Our state needs to match it, because I'm part of the court statistics project for our state. So I help give our state data to the National Court Statistics Project. So all of our stuff needs to match every other state's when it gets sent to them. Yeah. And then how I got this is I put up an alert on the state's website. And when I was searching for a job, I didn't just search in one location. I didn't just look at LinkedIn. I didn't just look at local job boards. I kind of had a finger in all of them, and then set up a program that would alert me when a data analyst position would come available. But I didn't just do data analyst. I had just analyst on there, data as a keyword. And so I was looking for keywords within the descriptions, not just the titles. It would match what I would do. I have a friend that works for the Department of Justice, and he says that all of their stuff is run through essentially an AI to read your resume to see if it matches what the job description is. And so I knew right away that it's going to be important that my resume's language matches the language in the job description. And I actually use ChatGPT to pull out the language. So I would feed it, because ChatGPT is not a be all end all, but it is a good tool to use. I don't use whatever it writes for me, but it's really good to be like, here's this job description, here's my resume. Where are things matching up? What's the language used? And then changing the keywords in mine to match the language of it. And that got me through the first bit. So all 6 of my applications to the state, I got at least a first interview with.
Wow. And those are for 6 different positions?
6 different positions. So I applied for 2 within the courts, 1 with fire, 2 with Department of Justice. I ended up removing from both of those, because once I did the first interview, I realized that what they had in the job description wasn't matching what they wanted me to do, and I wasn't interested. And then with the IRS, and a couple of them got removed, like they ended the positions. And then first round interviews are always with your peers. So I essentially half the team that I'm on now interviewed me via Zoom. And then the second one is in person, and it was with a management team. And then 3 weeks later got offered a position. And I took the first one I was offered. So I withdrew from the other ones that I was in consideration for.
Well, yeah, that's a great advice to search analyst with data as a keyword rather than just data analyst. And then the program that you set up, it sounds kind of like when LinkedIn will send you alerts on, this job matches your
Yes.
description. You kind of did the same thing, but not just on LinkedIn, but other job boards.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It was worth it. And I think I pulled that from Stack Overflow, someone had done it, or maybe it was Reddit, where someone's like, just set up a program that searches your local boards
Hmm.
for these keywords. And so it wasn't even something that was on the individual boards. That's something I set up separately. And I don't even remember. I did this like 2 years ago
Hmm. Yeah.
when I set it up and then would apply for things randomly. But I didn't start seriously applying until about this time last year.
And then your current role is in person or is it hybrid or
It's
remote?
technically hybrid. I work almost 100% from home, but with the state, because of how and it's also with the judicial department, everything is the language is distinct. So to be 100% at home would mean I'm not required to go to the office at all, but I'm required twice a year for meetings. So technically, I'm a hybrid, but I don't go into the office. I could if I wanted to. I could set up a desk. A couple of our team members go in once a week, but I don't need to.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I asked because I know a lot of our students are interested in remote work, but then there's different companies define remote differently
Differently.
and then define hybrid differently. So I guess I was wondering, like if the position you applied to didn't even mention that it was remote or hybrid, but it kind of became that for you.
So it said in the description that it was hybrid. And in the interview with the management team, that was one of my questions asking like what they meant by hybrid. And when you first start, they want you in the office. But we have team members in like Florida and Texas and
Oh,
Louisiana because they started here in Oregon and then moved out of state in the last
oh,
few years. And so,
yeah. So it's probably unlikely that Oregon would just hire someone in Florida, but like
yeah,
they have roots there and then they had the job
yep,
and moved.
yeah. Because you have to do in-person stuff when you first go in because there's a lot of security clearance. Because I look at a lot of secure data.
Oh, right. Yeah. You had
So
mentioned dashboards that you make. Are those public dashboards?
one of them is, and one of them is just for the courts. So it depends on what kind of data is in it. So I made one for like tax court, and it's about their days of disposition because the courts have so many days between filing and ruling to get things done. They want to keep on a time period. There's goals. And so that one is public because there's no confidential data on it. It's just this is the number of cases getting put in, this is the number out, and here they are broken down by the type within the tax court and the appeals process. The bench probation, however, you can search people's names that are on probation in it, and that is just for court staff to be able to use to help manage their own because they all just kind of do whatever they want otherwise. And so if we make one, it standardizes it across the state.
Yeah. So is the public dashboard, is that something that you could share a link and then I can like attach to this video that if people wanted to see your work kind of thing?
Potentially, I have to look at where it's at. So I go through our SharePoint site, and so I don't know what
Mhm.
the public site is. I'd have to look that up. I
Okay.
can make it up though. I can try. I know that it's there.
Yeah. So it's really a good idea. Like I've heard people use ChatGPT on their resumes, and I've heard that it's really good to tailor your resume to a particular job description. So, like, would you have basically like upload your current resume, upload the or copy paste the job description in, and then would ChatGPT or whatever AI you'd like to use output like a whole new resume, and then you can kind of go in and edit, make sure things are right.
You could. I wouldn't do that. It would be real bad.
Yeah.
They're not. It's not very good at writing things. I know some people use it straight up for writing. It's not great. ChatGPT is good if you feed it questions, and if you want it to be able to like write out the description of your current job, you have to. You can't just like feed it your resume and feed it the job description. Because I have my old job descriptions from my old positions that I also would feed the information, so copy and paste it in. You can't do the whole job description because it'll focus in on like diversity and inclusion stuff because those statements are on every single resume or every single job description. You have
Yeah.
to like get it in slowly. And so you kind of like feed it just the description part of what it's needed and then feed it just your job thing and then feed it the old ones and be like, how can I change this language? What are your, like, ask it questions like you would if it was a person instead of just a computer, I guess. Because the more questions you ask it, you can like narrow it down to what you're looking for.
Mhm.
And so it wasn't just a simple like one question. I would feed it some information, ask it some questions, be like, I don't like this tone. Can you make it more business professional tone? And it'll change the language it uses. Or can I match this language to this? Like, here's the job description. I've done this. Here's my job. How do I make this go? And it'll give me bullet points, or I'll ask for like a list of 3 things that are similar between this and this that
Yeah.
I can expand on when I write. But it's a tool. I wouldn't use it to write, only because now I've been on interview panels where I had to look over someone else's stuff, and you can always tell when they did not write their stuff.
Mm.
ChatGPT likes to get very flowy with its language, and sometimes you're using words that don't mean what you think they mean.
Uh, did you do like that also for cover letters to each job that you applied to?
Yeah, I dislike writing about myself a lot. And so I used ChatGPT to like pull out main points, the similarities between my resume and the job description. and be like, okay, can you expand on this? Why, how is that a match? Because it'll just list out if you ask for a list. Like,
Yeah.
can you expand on this point? And it'll write out a little blurb. And then I can use that with what I know I did in the job to write out a paragraph. So I'd have it pull out like 5 to 7 points between my resume and the job description that matched, and then have it expand on certain ones. And then I would write my own little blurb about that. And that would be my little paragraph.
Nice.
But
Any other like tips about, I mean, it sounded like you got that interview of your current position. You didn't really follow other leads. But any like what's your philosophy of what should be included in a cover letter?
I think for the cover letter, again, I'm really bad at them. I think you should try to focus on 3 to 5 main points of why you would be good for the job, and try to never talk about your weaknesses. So my main weakness with my current position is I had no court knowledge. Like, I don't know anything about the law, the statutes in Oregon, none of that. Never worked with a judge, just didn't do it.
Hmm.
And so I didn't put that in my resume at all.
Hmm.
I focused on the good things. All my resume, my cover letter. So if it said like working with judges and other stakeholders, I focused in on working with management teams and my coworkers and how I communicated data to people who didn't know anything about data,
Hmm.
people who were wowed by cool pivot tables.
Yeah.
Like, how would you explain that? And then expand that to, it could cover judges and other pieces of the public.
Hmm.
So don't call out a weakness, make it look at the strengths.
Nice. That's really good advice. So the interview process, you said you had one interview with your peers, another interview with management, and then you got the job after that. Did you have any, well, I guess maybe I'll ask generally, what were the interviews like? What kind of questions, what kind of tips could you share of like preparing, not for necessarily like your particular job, obviously, but just general tips about doing well in the first interview, well enough that you can get a second interview?
So I actually, Wells Fargo had this like acronym. It was START. I don't remember what it was, what they all stand for anymore, but a lot of them are going to be situational questions. Both interviews were the same, where it asks you like, describe a time when XYZ happened, or you had to work on a project that took longer than necessary. And you always give like the situation, the task at hand, what you did to make it work, like how you overcame whatever the problem was that you were fixing, and then what the outcome was. And so I kind of answered my questions in those. Like, I'll give a situation. This is exactly what happened. Here was the task that I needed to perform. Here's how I performed it and met these expectations. And the outcome was I found new fraud,
Hmm.
and it caused us to work on this other project as an offshoot. And so I kind of go into an interview with all of that in mind
Hmm.
whenever they ask me a question. My other interview suggestion was to make sure you have questions to ask them at the end that are appropriate for who you're asking. So when I was doing the team and it wasn't management, at the end, they always ask you, what questions do you have? I want to ask questions that are going to tell me, one, about how the team works and the dynamics and the kind of work they're doing. Does it match with what they said in the description? Am I going to like working there? Because I've worked in some places where it wasn't great. And then you immediately, like, you start and you immediately want to leave. I didn't want that. And so for the team, I always ask, if you have a magic wand that can fix any problem on your team, what would you fix and why? Because it's going to tell you what the problems are.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it is like the database went down, and like, can you live with whatever their problems are? I did have a manager once tell me that she wishes people didn't take 15-minute breaks. They only took 10-minute breaks because they got 15-minute breaks as a 5-minute gift from the company, and we should really not use them.
Oh.
And I'm like, okay, I think it's time to not work for this one. And then for management, I always ask about the last time they had an employee that was promoted. What steps did they take to make that promotion? Like, what qualities did they have that made them a candidate for a promotion within the team? So I want to know like what they're looking for within the team. On the flip side, I always ask the last time someone quit, like, why did they quit? Why did they not meet expectations? Like, why did they leave the team?
Yeah.
And so
see if you get like cross-eyed like looks of like should we really share kind of thing.
right. And I've gotten those. With this team, it was the last person that left didn't like working remote. They didn't feel like they had enough support. And so they wanted to make sure that I clearly understood that if I reach out, I can get help from whoever could offer it, which is true. If I have a question, I can message anyone on the team and be on a call in like 2 seconds and getting whatever question I have fixed quite easily.
Yeah. So, on your, that was a lot. That was
Yeah,
a lot of
sorry.
really good information there. I wanted to ask about, you mentioned an acronym for the different things that when you're, what was the acronym, or you forgot?
So it was STAR. I don't remember what all of the letters stood for, but I remember it being STAR, but it was like the situation. So what situation? Answer the question, the task, how you met the task. So situation, task. I don't remember what A stood for, but essentially it's how you addressed the situation.
Addressed.
How you fixed it. Yeah. And then the results are.
Oh, okay.
So what was the result of all of this?
Nice. Yeah, I can imagine that that's a really good approach. That if you're asked a question in an interview, to have like a framework to answer it, that it's you don't want too short of an answer that isn't well thought or well communicated, but then you don't want an hour
Rambles.
long that you're going on and on about this. In your interview, did you have any um like technical type of questions in your interview? Like show us you can do a pivot table.
Well,
You have 10 seconds, go.
they did send like a task before the interview for the management one. So between the two, they sent me like, here's some court data. What does it tell you? And they made it initially like I didn't understand what they were looking for. They essentially wanted me to calculate days to disposition, but they didn't label any of the columns in it because they want you to ask questions.
Uh, uh,
See, like, hey, here's this data. You have no idea what it is. How do you do
mm.
it?
And they
And
were
so,
expecting you to reach back out and say, "Hey, can I get the code book or data dictionary?"
essentially, I'm like, what does this mean? There's blanks here. Like, oh, that means that the case is still open. It's not been disposed of.
Mm,
Like, okay, well, that's great. I can then create a pivot table. And then they would ask in the interview, like, what did you learn from this? Like, are they going to meet their data disposition goal? Which they don't tell you either. I ended up looking that up on the website,
mm,
like the Oregon Judiciary website, what the goals were and what they were. And so that actually surprised them. I'm like, well, I looked up days of disposition. They want like 98% between these dates and these dates. Like, oh, you went and looked it up. I'm like, well, it wasn't provided and you were asking me to do it. So I did, yes.
nice. That's good independence and like critical thinking.
Yeah. And so they did, but it was like a 5 minute thing. And
Mm,
it essentially, like afterwards, after I was hired, I asked about it. And they're like, oh, we initially, like, we on purpose make it very broad. So when we want you to look up information or ask us about the information.
mm,
So they thought that I didn't ask about dates to disposition, what the goals were, even though that's what they were asking for. I only asked about like blank columns and the column names.
mm,
And so they were a little hesitant because they thought that I hadn't done enough of the research until they
mm.
talked to me. And I'm like, no, I just looked it up first on the website and then explained that when I'm working, I'll look things up first. If I can't find an answer, then I'll reach out. But I also worked on a team at Wells Fargo where I was the only person that understood Excel. So if I needed help on Excel, I couldn't reach out to my peers. I had to
Mm.
figure it out on my own.
Yeah. Mentioning that, do you think that really increased your chances of getting the job that you had that Wells Fargo position and you're the data person there?
I think it did, mainly because a lot of our work is done in either SQL or Excel currently. I'm trying to make a business case for why we need Python or R because it would make some of the stuff I'm doing way easier.
Yeah.
And so being able to work in Excel and find how to do things without having to ask someone else for it, I think kind of gave me a leg up, especially
Mm,
when it comes to the SQL stuff, because most of the team is self-trained. Because about 10 years ago is when judicial department switched over to SQL for their data management.
mm,
Before it was in some other random program and it was really hard to get information out of. So all of the senior analysts on my team are self-taught SQL and it's all T-SQL,
mm,
which is
mm,
slightly different than everything we learned at Eastern.
mm.
Different enough that it's sometimes annoying, but not terrible. It's SQL. It's almost the same.
Yeah. And do you think it sounded like you started at Eastern and then you got this job after that? Is that the right chronology?
Yeah. So I
Uh,
started Eastern in August and I got this job in February.
Okay. And do you think that helped like your interview or your case that like, hey, I'm in the middle of a master's degree?
I think it did. I know they're kind of waiting for me to finish my degree because well, one, I'll get a pay bump for it, but um, I'm trying to make the business case for Python. I mean, having this degree and being able to show them how it works is kind of helping that. But then it
Mhm.
might lead to me teaching my team how to use Python on top of
Yeah.
it all, which would
Yeah.
be nice.
All right. Yeah. Is your team willing and like capable of that?
Yeah, everyone is actually really good. It's
Mm,
a very chill team. Everyone is very knowledgeable, but in different things. So we have people that are really good at Power BI.
mm,
And then we have one guy who only does SQL stuff, but he does some of the most complicated stuff in SQL. And so
mm,
if you have any SQL question, he's the one you go to. And they are all willing to learn another skill that would make things easier
mm.
and to share their knowledge. And so I think they would all be jump on the chance to make something a little bit easier.
Yeah. That sounds like a great team that you have.
It's it's pretty awesome. It's the first time I've worked where everyone is knowledgeable and shares the knowledge
Mm, yeah.
and no one gets irritated if you reach out. They're like, oh, I have this thing. And they'll talk for like 5, 10 minutes over whatever question you have because they want to make sure one, you understand it, but they're really excited to share that they
Mm,
have this knowledge that you don't have.
mm. Yeah, that's really cool. I wanted to ask, probably, I guess this is my last question because we're getting long here. Not so much about like interviews and resumes, but just your day-to-day use of ChatGPT. You mentioned that you used it for cover letters and for your resume. What does it look like in your current position to use that? And yeah.
So I don't actually use it at all in my current position,
Mm,
mainly because it's sensitive data. So we're not
mm,
allowed to have it on our computers. And I think Excel and Power BI now have some kind of Microsoft
yeah.
AI on it. We're not allowed to use that either because they're
Mm,
worried because as you use it, ChatGPT is also using it to learn. And
mm,
so we don't want to give it any confidential data.
Mm.
And so it's completely locked down. So my day to day, I don't use ChatGPT or any AI at all because they're worried about
Yeah.
confidential data. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
But I have used it if I have a particular problem that I can't quite solve or find in Stack Overflow, because it will tell like, hey, I'm trying to do this. Give me like a single line of this code, and it'll pop something out because
Yeah.
it can go through all of Stack Overflow in one question. And
Hmm.
so I have on my personal computer looked up like, hey, I need this column and this column to both be trimmed and then like stuck together. Give me some line of code for that.
Hmm.
Because T-SQL doesn't like you to aggregate and then try to use a where statement later for it. You have to essentially build a tent table to
Hmm.
get around some of that.
Hmm.
It's just so much easier in Python or R.
Yeah. I keep thinking questions. Try to try to make it my last two questions. The oh now I'm gonna forget one. The second one is just general ending thoughts. Oh, the first one though, since you mentioned SQL a lot, I wanted to ask what skill you learned in Eastern's program that you think has been most helpful in your day to day.
um, oh man, actually doing the data visualization and learning Tableau helped me learn Power BI because they're very similar. They're different, but they're similar. And that was where I had no knowledge whatsoever, hadn't worked with it outside of schooling at all. Um, but also some of the SQL stuff we learned about time dates, essentially. Um, Situation. I had a project where I need to take Greenwich time zone for calls coming in and move it to Pacific time zone, but also keeping in mind that we have daylight savings time here.
Mm.
And everyone else was building like temp tables, feeding them into another temp table to get like the final time. And in postgrade, they had a thing where you can do the time switch over.
Mm.
And it includes the different daylight
Oh.
savings times in it in a single line of code. And so I
Uh,
used that. And everything we do is peer reviewed, especially if it goes out to public. And so one of my peers saw, they're like, wait, you did it this way. And so they've gone back to their code. And so now it's on our shared site of a like line of code to switch between Greenwich time zone to Pacific time zone with
Nice.
daylight savings time. So that
Yeah.
was apparently they didn't know that that existed before
Mm.
I had done it.
Mm. That's
And
very
I'm like,
cool.
oh, I learned that at learned that at Eastern
Nice. Very nice.
randomly from somewhere
Yeah.
else.
Well, I really appreciate all your time and all your thoughts. Any final thoughts or encouragement for students watching this video?
Um, Apply to everything.
Hmm.
Um, I don't remember who told me once, but their job descriptions are a list of wants, not needs. And so if you meet at least 50% of them, apply for it. The worst they're going to do is say no. And the more you work on tailoring your resumes and your cover letters to things, the easier it's going to get. So even if you're not getting the job, it's great practice. And that's how I approached all of my resumes, all of the cover letters, all of the interviews. Is it's even if I don't get it, I have now practiced at a thing and I will get better and eventually get it.